Hello and welcome. My name is Christopher Woodfill. I currently work at the Helen Keller National Center located in Sands Point, New York. Here at Helen Keller, I work as the regional representative for New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. And those are the 4 territories that I am responsible for. For my job, I travel all over the 4 areas that I am responsible for. I go around and meet with a various amount of different deaf-blind individuals. I work with a range of people starting at the age of 15 through all the way through adult life. I meet with the consumers and assess what their needs may be in order to improve their quality of life. So this could mean to improve their quality of life in the work site or in social situations and different areas as well. So in addition to working with consumers, I also work with service providers. Service providers can include independent living centers, group homes, schools and colleges, workplaces, and vocational rehabilitation agencies. I work with all of these different service providers so that we can be able to work together and train the individuals who are deaf-blind. I do have many other responsibilities being a regional representative, but I don't want to focus on that. I do want you to know that I have worked as the regional representative for the past 2 years. Prior to working at the Helen Keller National Center, I was a transition teacher for 13 years at the Wisconsin School for the Deaf. I would like to now focus on assessments. What kind of assessments do we use for assessing transition teenagers and young adults? The assessments I typically do are informal, but on occasion I have conducted a few formal assessments. Formal assessments really aren't a big part of the overall assessment process. So, due to the fact that I work at the Helen Keller National Center, I always start off working with the consumers to discuss their hearing and their vision. So when I assess a consumer, I like to request a copy of their audiogram for their hearing, as well as an ophthalmology report for their vision. I like to be able to read through them to have a better idea and understanding of that person's deafblindness. I like to discuss with the consumer or with the family what the consumer is able to hear and what they're able to see. I avoid asking what they can't see and what they can't hear because I don't want the conversation to become negative. I like to look at the situation from a positive aspect of what they're able to hear and see. So this video is focused on charge syndrome. So I do want to take the time to discuss the overall health of a teenager or young adult who has charge. Often, when a teenager has charge syndrome, they have other health problems that show up through their childhood. I don't really want to go in depth about those health problems a person could have because of charge, but I would like you to be aware that there are many challenges that could affect the assessment process. During the assessment, I don't need any medical records for the consumer. It's more of a conversation between the consumer, their family, and myself. Another important part of the assessment is the communication. So what that means is we need to know what the consumer's communication method is, what their mode of communication is that they prefer to use. So for example, they could be oral and use spoken English, or they could prefer to use a pen and paper and write back and forth. They may need supports during their spoken time. They could also be an American Sign Language user. They could use Signed Exact English, also known as SEE, cued speech, and other forms of communication. It's very important to know the consumer's language and their preferred mode of communication. During the assessment, I like to assess the social support system that the consumer has in their life. So what I mean by social supports is their family involved? Is the family involved and supportive of the consumer? Does the consumer have a social life and hang out with friends? Or are they isolated and only have maybe one or two friends that they hang out with? Social support system is very important, and it's really important for the young adult to have this to ensure a successful transition. The more support they have, the higher the success rate of the transition into adult life. So the last part of the assessment, I like to focus on their future plans. So has the consumer graduated high school? What are their plans? Do they want to go to college or to a training program? perhaps get a certification in a special program? Do they want to focus on a work career? There are many ideas that are discussed between the consumer and myself, and I'd just like to get an idea of what their plans are for after graduation. So as a regional representative, I don't focus too heavily on the work aspect of a consumer's life. What do they want to do with their life? Do they have a career path picked out? It's a conversation I like to have with the consumer. I don't want to feel like it's an interview because that's really not my goal. If I ask a consumer what their plans are, but they aren't sure, that's fine. I will ask what their interests and hobbies are so that we can narrow it down to possible interests for the future. Sometimes the consumers know exactly what they want to do in the future. So that I need to know if the consumer knows what it will involve. Do they know what the job requirements are for that, what they want to do? Do you need a college degree for that? Do you have to have a specific skill set? Will any specific modifications or accommodations be necessary to ensure the consumer can do their job successfully? Everything really depends on the answers that the consumer gives me, and then we can navigate the conversation and the discussion. Another important topic to discuss is the personal preference for where the consumer wants to live after graduating high school. Do they want to continue living at home with their families? Do they want to live on their own, perhaps in an apartment? Do they want to live in a group home or an assisted living facility? Or perhaps move into an apartment and have a personal care assistant involved? These are important questions to ask the consumer so they can better plan for the future. So another important topic to discuss is whether or not the consumer wants to get married, have a family. Do they want to live alone or with someone? These are also important to know. What are the consumer's hobbies and interests? What do they like to do in their free time? Some consumers like to go shopping or travel, cook, make crafts, read. I mean, the list can go on and on. So typically, going back with the discussions, it takes about between 2 and 3 hours to touch base on all the different topics that I have previously mentioned. And that's going to help me as a professional in the deaf-blind field. It's important to develop a successful plan for the young adult to transition to the rest of their life. It's vital to have a comprehensive assessment on the consumer to better able come up with an action plan that meets the consumer's wants and meet their needs. I think it's important for the parents to be involved in the assessment process because they can add a lot of knowledge, feedback, as well as support. When the consumer answers the questions, it's key to allow the parents to add to the conversation. When the consumer is answering the questions, parents don't want to take over and speak for the child, but empower and support their child. We want to avoid the parents answering for their child by saying he or she. It would be nice and helpful if the parents could have a copy of the audiogram as well as the ophthalmology report so that it's present at the assessment and we can refer back to it for reports. All of this will help to ensure a successful transition plan for the consumer. Thank you so much.